Welcome to the Walking Classroom Podcast. My name's Finley.
And I'm Amelia. Today, we're here at Mammoth Cave National Park on a special assignment.
Geez, Amelia, you make us sound like secret agents or something.
Right. Well, what we're doing is sort of undercover work, in that we do have to make our way underground to gather some information.
Ha ha. Like Amelia said, we're here at Mammoth Cave National Park on a mission, and it's to complete a school assignment. Our teacher wants us to learn all we can about the history of Mammoth Cave National Park so that we can share what we discover with the rest of the class.
And today, we're super lucky because we have a park ranger, Ranger Jonathan, to be our private guide and give us some background information on the history of this special place. Oh, look, there he is now. Hi, Ranger Jonathan. I'm Amelia.
And I'm Finley.
Hi, it's nice to meet you both and welcome you to Mammoth Cave National Park, one of Kentucky's National Park Service sites. One thing I do want to mention briefly, and which we'll talk about more later, is that here at Mammoth Cave National Park, there's a lot to be explored, not just underground, but above ground too.
Oh yes, we noticed that from the park map.
Of course, plenty of folks come here to tour the cave. After all, with 426 miles of underground passageways, it is the world's longest cave system. But there are nearly 53,000 acres, that's over 80 square miles, of surface area above ground to be explored as well.
Wow, that's a lot of ground to cover. We'll be getting plenty of physical activity today.
And physical activity is good for you, especially when it's done outdoors. Did you know that spending at least 120 minutes a week outside helps keep you healthy?
That's a total of 2 hours. I know we're not exploring all of Mammoth Cave National Park today or spending the entire day here, but the time we'll be spending together in the park will definitely give us a good start on those outside minutes. And I will get a good start on my steps for the week too.
You're right. But besides the opportunity to be more physically active, there are other benefits to getting outside and visiting parks.
Like what?
Well, even just 5 minutes walking in nature has been shown to improve people's mood, and it has helped them feel more relaxed too.
I get that. Being outside in the fresh air and surrounded by sights and sounds of nature always puts a smile on my face and pep in my step. And speaking of steps, we should take advantage of this beautiful day and get moving.
Hold on, Amelia. Before we begin, we need to share a few basic guidelines.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, everyone. As you walk, remember to always keep aware of your surroundings. When you are wearing headphones like you are now, it is important to keep one ear uncovered by an earbud and to make sure that you don't wander off and get away from the group.
Thanks for sharing those tips. They'll be equally important when we make our way into the cave later. You'll want to stay aware of your surroundings and stay with me.
Yes, sir.
Great! Before we talk about the history of the park and Mammoth Cave itself, let's walk down to the cave's main entrance and take a look around. What do you see?
It looks like we're in a forest.
There are lots of trees and lots of rocks too.
You're absolutely right. But would you believe that over 300 million years ago, this whole area was underwater? Over time, shells and skeletons of marine animals collected on what was once the ocean floor. As layers of these materials built up, they eventually hardened and became the limestone rock beds that make up much of this area of Kentucky.
So, when did things start opening up underground?
Well, about 10 to 15 million years ago, water from streams and rivers flowed over the limestone surface, entering through small cracks. Over time, this movement of water caused areas of limestone to dissolve, forming the passages that make up Mammoth Cave.
If I remember my numbers correctly, you said there were over 400 miles of passageways, but an area of just 80 square miles? How can that be?
Great question. There are actually 5 levels of passageways within Mammoth Cave, with the lowest level located over 360 feet below the surface. That being said, No one knows exactly how deep the cave goes. Geologists think there could be as many as 600 miles of undiscovered passageways.
That's incredible.
And it's not just the sheer size of the cave itself that's incredible. The history of Mammoth Cave National Park includes lots of fascinating stories about people, too, starting as far back as 12,000 years ago.
Whoa, that's a long time ago.
It certainly is. Although there were humans in the area way back then, it took some time before they made their way into the cave. That first happened about 3,000 years ago, when pre-contact people from the late Archaic and early Woodland period were mining gypsum and other minerals from Mammoth Cave and other caves in the area, using mussel shells to scrape the minerals off the walls.
What did they use gypsum and the other minerals for?
Some minerals might have been used as medicine, while gypsum was used to make white paint. Artifacts like woven sandals, gourd bowls, and even some pre-contact cave art are still visible in the parts of the cave that were used for gypsum mining. The location of these tells us that these early people were working in the upper 3 levels of Mammoth Cave until about 2,200 years ago, when their activity in the cave stopped. Today, there are still many groups of Native Americans that have connections to the park's lands.
So, when did exploration of the cave start up again?
It actually began again late in the 18th century. That was when European settlers arrived in the Green River Valley. In fact, the first European discovery of Mammoth Cave was said to have been in the late 1790s, when a hunter entered the cave while following an injured bear along the river. Not long after that, the cave's largest natural entrance, known as the historic entrance, was surveyed and registered. After that came the next phase in the cave's history, all thanks to bats.
Bats? Ooh, what part did they play?
Well, bats had been living in the cave for thousands of years, so there was plenty of guano in the soil.
Guano? Is that what I think it is? Bat poop?
You're right. Guano is the waste product of bats, and over time, all that guano made the cave's dirt rich with calcium nitrate, a chemical compound which can be mixed with other materials to create potassium nitrate, or saltpeter, the main ingredient used in creating gunpowder. Because people needed gunpowder, mining saltpeter from the cave was a great way to make money in the early 1800s, and even more so with the start of the War of 1812.
Was that due to the British blockade? Remember, Finley? We learned that in social studies.
Yes, because of the blockade, importing gunpowder had become very difficult. But then, so was saltpeter mining. Most of the mine workers were enslaved men who were brought to the cave to shovel and haul dirt for long hours in poor conditions. Thanks to their hard work, though, around 400,000 pounds of saltpeter were removed from Mammoth Cave and made into gunpowder for the war effort. After the war ended in 1815, the demand for saltpeter fell off and mining stopped.
What happened next?
Well, with the end of saltpeter mining came a new opportunity. Around this time, the cave became known as Mammoth Cave because of its mammoth size, and it quickly became a local attraction. As word of mouth spread, people wanted to tour the cave, and the cave's owners, Hyman and Simon Gratz, found themselves suddenly in need of tour guides.
Who did they find to work as guides?
Many of the early cave guides were former miners or men who came from local families. Then, when Franklin Gorin purchased Mammoth Cave in 1838, he brought enslaved men to work as guides. These men included Stephen Bishop, who was just 17 years old, along with Matt Bransford and Nick Bransford. Trained by local guides Joe Shackelford and Archibald Miller Jr., these men served as the main tour guides for the next 20 years.
That's a long time.
It certainly is, and far longer than Gorin owned the cave. You see, after about a year, Gorin sold the cave to Dr. John Cron. While he was the owner, Cron, who was the nephew of William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition, you've probably learned about that, made a few improvements. He built roads near the cave and updated or renovated buildings in the area, including a hotel.
What was it like touring the cave back then?
At that time, only about 10 miles of passageways had been discovered. Bishop and the Bransfords were leading tours, some as long as 18 hours, which often included famous visitors like opera singer Jenny Lind, writer Ralph Waldo Emerson, and many scientists. Using torches or oil lamps to light the way, the guides and visitors made their way down ladders and over rocks and boulders.
That sounds dangerous.
True, the cave could be dangerous, especially for people who were not familiar with it. Besides wet walkways and falling rocks, the cave had other obstacles tourists could confront if they weren't careful. Sometimes their torches or lamps blew out, leaving them in total darkness. Not to worry, though. The guides kept guests safe by knowing the routes well and by being alert and prepared.
It sounds like the guide's role was a lot of responsibility.
It sure was, and completing a tour was quite an accomplishment for guides and visitors alike. They often left their names smoked into the cave walls to mark the occasion. In fact, you can see some of their autographs when you tour the cave.
They literally made their mark on history.
That's certainly true, and the guides became quite well known. Bishop came to be an expert on Mammoth Cave. He was the first person to cross the 105-foot bottomless pit. It was so deep that torches seemed to disappear when thrown into it. According to cave lore, Bishop laid a ladder across the pit and, holding a lantern in his teeth, crawled to the whole way to the other side.
That's impressive. Did he make any other discoveries?
Yes, as a matter of fact, after digging his way through a stretch of tight, winding passages, Bishop found himself in a space with the ceiling so low he had to crawl to continue. Once he came out of that section, he was so overjoyed that he could finally stand upright and have space around him on all sides, that he named the area Great Relief Hall, and that remains its name today.
After being in such cramped spaces, I'm sure that was a great relief.
Absolutely. Bishop also discovered several bodies of water: Lake Lethe, River Styx, and Echo River, on the cave's bottom level, where he found fish that had no eyes.
Cool. He must have been a popular guide.
He was. With his knowledge of geology and mineralogy, Bishop became famous well beyond Kentucky, and visitors often requested him.
What about the other guides?
As for the other early tour guides, Matt Bransford and 4 generations of his family served as guides at Mammoth Cave well into the 20th century, and that tradition resumed into the 21st century, when his great-great-grandson became a 5th-generation guide in 2004.
And what about Nick Bransford?
After he finished tours and other work on the cave property each day, Nick earned extra money by capturing eyeless fish from the cave's underground springs and selling them to tourists. He donated money to start a school in the community and actually served as a tour guide for half a century.
The guides' families have a real connection to the cave and to this area, don't they?
That's right. Connection and community are a big part of the history of this area. Now, back to Dr. Cron. Besides tourism, he had another reason for purchasing the cave: a cure for tuberculosis. He thought that the cave air and steady temperature could help those with the disease get better. So, in 1842, he set up an area in the cave to house some of the tuberculosis patients. 2 of their huts can still be seen today.
Did his patients get cured?
At first, the people living in the cave seemed to improve, but the damp environment eventually made them worse instead of better. Several died, and the experiment lasted only 5 months, ending in early 1843.
That's a bummer.
Well, While that was unsuccessful, Cron's investment was not a total loss, because the cave was becoming even more popular as a tourist attraction in 1842. He had Stephen Bishop draw a map of Mammoth Cave. It covered approximately 20 miles and was in use until the 1880s. And while Cron eventually died of tuberculosis in 1849 and Bishop in 1857, tourism continued to rise, and not just at Mammoth Cave itself.
How did that happen?
Discoveries of other caves in the area offered opportunities for local families who found that opening smaller caves with interesting cave formations could earn some of that extra money. By the 1860s, Diamond Caverns, Indian Cave, and Hundred Domes Cave had opened. Even though these smaller caves were getting visitors, the local people knew that tourists were most interested in Mammoth Cave. So by the end of the century, they began searching for ways to connect to Mammoth Cave.
Let me guess. That led to even more cave exploration.
Yes, exploration was going on all the time. In 1908, a German explorer, Max Kemper, spent 8 months exploring and surveying Mammoth Cave. After discovering several new entrances, he used surveying instruments to create an updated map.
Besides cave exploration, what else brought people to the area?
Developments in transportation also had a big impact. Tourism rose even more with the building of the Mammoth Cave Railroad in 1886, which connected Park City, Kentucky, to the Mammoth Cave Hotel. Then after a lock and dam were built on the Green River in 1906, Mammoth Cave could also be reached by steamboat.
Wow, that must have brought in even more tourists.
You're right. And more visitors and more cave businesses led to a phenomenon known as the Kentucky Cave Wars, with automobile travel bringing an even greater number of tourists to south central Kentucky. Roadside signs and advertisers known as cave cappers showed up along the roadways to attract visitors to the now more than 20 area caves.
That sounds intense.
It got to be. In 1925, Floyd Collins, who had discovered Great Crystal Cave under his family's farmland the decade before, set out on an exploration of Sand Cave. He ended up trapped 55 feet underground, dying after 14 days. This quickly became national news and inspired an already growing movement to turn the area into a national park.
I'd like to hear more about that.
A group of citizens, led by Kentucky's Senator M.M. Logan, had formed the Mammoth Cave National Park Association in 1924 to persuade Congress to create a national park in the region. Thanks to their efforts, the park's creation was approved in May of 1926, and Congress designated the area of land to be used for Mammoth Cave National Park. But it took some time to gain control of it.
How did they accomplish that?
Some land was donated outright. Then the Kentucky National Park Commission was formed to purchase the remaining 45,000 acres from the people who had been living there. This meant that 600 families had to move so that the land could be restored to its natural state.
What had to be done to restore it?
Several years of hard work. 4 groups of young men from the Civilian Conservation Corps arrived in 1935 and began reforesting the area by planting more than 1 million trees. In addition, they built roads and other structures in the park and also improved trails in the cave.
I'll bet the trail improvements helped in farther with the cave exploration.
Definitely. In 1938, guides Leo and Claude Hunt and Pete and Carl Hansen ventured through the cave's passages, discovering gemstone and dripstone formations, and further exploration followed. By the time the land was designated as a national park, on July 1st, 1941, 44 miles of the cave were mapped, with additional mapping being done as time went on. As of 2023, it was 426 miles. But exploration of Mammoth Cave is pretty much ongoing, since hidden passageways continue to be uncovered and explored. Now, 3D laser scanning technology enables folks to see perspectives of the Mammoth Cave that have never been seen before.
And since it's been a national park, it probably gets even more visitors exploring it too.
More visitors and more recognition. The park itself gets nearly 2 million visitors every year, with about 600,000 of them touring the cave. So since it's been a national park, hundreds of millions of people have visited and discovered Mammoth Cave National Park for themselves.
You mentioned recognition?
That's right, I did. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, designated Mammoth Cave National Park as a World Heritage Site in 1981. This means the park is a place of outstanding value and should be protected for future generations to appreciate and enjoy. Beyond the fascinating history of the cave, Mammoth Cave National Park is recognized for its natural features. With its forests, grasslands, and caves, it supports more than 1,300 plant species and is home to over 70 threatened, endangered, or state-listed species.
So, Mammoth Cave National Park is a great example of biodiversity, right? Remember, Finley? That's when there's a great variety of plant and animal life in an environment.
Absolutely. And that's true both above and below ground, where it holds one of the world's most diverse cave ecosystems. In fact, you can find every type of cave formation, from stalactites to gypsum flowers, and more than 130 cave-dwelling species in the Mammoth Cave. Some, like bats, live in the cave only part of the time, coming out at night to feed, while others spend their entire lives underground. Because they are not exposed to light, they are usually white or transparent and do not have eyes.
Whoa, does that make them blind?
Yes, but while these animals may not have sight, their other senses are highly developed, or they have special characteristics called adaptations to help them survive. For example, insects that live in caves usually have very long antennae to feel their way around. Other animals can feel vibrations which tell them that something to eat is nearby.
You said something about bats. I want to hear more about them.
No problem. I'm a bit of an expert. There are actually 13 species of bats that live in and around the cave. While they may be creepy to some people, bats are important to the ecosystem because they feed on night-flying insects, like moths and mosquitoes. When bats fly by, you can hear squeaking as they emit high-frequency sound waves and listen to the echoes. This is called echolocation, and it helps bats communicate, navigate, and find food in the dark.
What about animal life above ground?
Above the ground, Mammoth Cave National Park is home to a rich variety of wildlife. It's not unusual for visitors to see deer and wild turkey snacking alongside the roads, and to find eastern gray squirrels, birds, salamanders, beetles, and freshwater fish while hiking, biking, or paddling along the park's many trails and waterways, like the Green River, which runs 27 miles through the park.
Besides all of this plant and animal life, there are other things to see too, right?
Yes, there are a number of historic sites within the park, and they tell the story of the communities that existed in the area. One of these sites is the Old Guide Cemetery. It contains the graves of explorers, as well as those of 3 patients from Dr. Cron's tuberculosis hospital. We've covered a lot of ground today in talking about the park's history, but there's plenty more to see and do. Now, let's see how much you can remember from our time together. First of all, what people were among the first people to explore the Mammoth Cave and why?
Well, indigenous people mined gypsum and other minerals from the cave.
That was thousands of years ago.
Some members of the Cherokee, Shawnee, Chickasaw nations.
The next wave of mining activity came in early 1800s, when saltpeter was mined and used to make gunpowder, which was a big help in the War of 1812.
Not long after that, Mammoth Cave was named because of its mammoth size.
And then?
It became a tourist attraction, and everyone wanted to come see it.
Some of the early guides were former miners, and they trained enslaved men to serve as guides too.
That's correct. Can you tell me anything about these guides?
Well, Stephen Bishop became pretty famous as an expert of Mammoth Cave. He explored areas of the cave that had not been explored before. In the 1840s, Dr. John Cron had the idea to create tuberculosis hospital.
By the early 20th century, local folks who had discovered other smaller caves in the area opened them for tours, which started
the Kentucky Cave Wars.
All the interest in caves in the area actually got people interested in the creation of a national park,
which was approved by Congress in the 1920s.
Then they had to acquire the land, which they did in the mid-1930s. But this meant that lots of families who lived in the area had to give up their homes and move so that tens of thousands of acres of land could be reforested and restored to its natural state.
Do you remember when it was officially designated as a national park?
July 1st, 1941. At that time, there were just 44 miles mapped.
And what can you tell me about plants and animals in the cave and the land around us?
I've got this. Mammoth Cave National Park, with all its plant and animal life, both above and below ground, is a great example of biodiversity.
And of interconnectedness, too. After all, everything above and below the ground, the plants, the animals, and even us, is part of one big community that depends on each other. And so, conservation, or the protection and preservation of the environment and the life within it, is really important if we want the park and all that's living in it to be here for future generations.
And millions more visitors.
To enjoy, we all have to help protect and preserve this place.
As we head back to the visitor center, and those of you listening wrap up your walk, I'd like for everybody to think about what we've learned today. Think about the key events and people in Mammoth Cave National Park's history. Can you share some of the ways Mammoth Cave has been used over time? How did those uses contribute to the development of a community around the cave? How has that community expanded over time? What is the role of Mammoth Cave National Park in the natural community? Is there anything we can do to help it continue to play this role?
Thanks, Ranger Jonathan. We really enjoyed walking, listening, and learning about the history of Mammoth Cave National Park with you.
Thanks for visiting.
To those of you out there listening and learning, thanks for joining us, both above and below ground, for this podcast episode of The Walking Classroom, a program of Alliance for a Healthier Generation.
This podcast episode was made possible in part by a grant from the National Park Foundation. Happy trails!